Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC, a proud member of the Pantheon podcast team.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. Wow, what happened to January? Just remember popping that cork on 2025, and here we are, February. In any case, Metal Walt's here tonight with a really cool, inquisitive interview with a Canadian rocker, and this guy has a story that you gotta hear. Metal Walt, what's going on? What do you got for us this week?
So Steve Hill is going to be the featured guest tonight, and it's a cool story because it's important for us, John, to bring artists to the forefront of our listeners that they may never have heard of. So Steve Hill is your prototypical do-it-yourself artist. He was a guy that, formed bands, but he found out over the years that was easier and cheaper and logistically better for him to do it all himself. So here it is 30 years later, he's a one-man show. He records and plays every instrument on the studio album. But what's even cooler, when he goes on the road, he plays by himself. He's playing guitar, he's singing, he's got all these additional pieces of equipment attached to his guitar. He's got a couple little basses, and he's doing all this stuff. It's like he's ambidextrous or something like that, which makes it even cooler. So it's good stuff.
That's awesome, man. Those Canadians. Hey, listen, if you've missed some of the episodes in January, go back to the website and check it out. Last week, we had the Eddie Van Halen 70th birthday episode with Johnny Bean of Johnny Bean TV, Brian Schlegel, the new podcast, 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. And at the beginning of the month, they had Jesse Fink, author of AC/DC. He was here with the top 15 AC/DC songs. And in that episode, we also had a listener that joined the show. And if you want to be part of this and possibly get on a future episode, then get over to metalmayhemroc.com and sign up for the newsletter, join our community, get involved, and we may get you on an episode in the near future. While you're there, check out the merch page with hoodies, hats, shirts, posters. God, we even have phone cases. And if you enjoy what we're doing here, subscribe to the pod, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or wherever you're listening to it. Metal Walt, what's coming up? You got a couple episodes in the can. What do we got the next couple weeks?
So guitar virtuoso Bumblefoot has a new album out. It just got released called Bumblefoot Returns. It's a great conversation. It's funny. We get off the music and onto some great life things. And then we have our next in the History of Heavy Metal series, 1998, which is a pivotal year in the late 90s.
1998. Oh, my God. We started that like 2.5 years ago with 73. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. But tonight, Steve Hill, the Canadian blues rock singer and guitarist, known for his unique one-man performance. For my co-host, Metal Walt, I'm the Vernomatic. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
So today we welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC Steve Hill, blues rock singer and guitarist who has taken the do-it-yourself approach concept to a whole nother level. So Steve, welcome to Metal Mayhem ROC.
It's great to be here, Walt.
Well, thanks. Glad to have you on. I've been looking forward to this one. You are definitely a unique artist, and I want to hear all about how you made it this far and also about your great new album, Hanging on a String. Just great blues rock with some really, really cool and interesting stories, probably autobiographical behind them. But Steve, maybe before we get started, you're French-Canadian, and I just was curious, learning music in the household, typically you start your music, you learn from your brothers and sisters, or let's say your parents, but kind of what was your musical upbringing as a kid, and kind of what inspired you to take this on as a career?
My mom played piano a little bit, but my dad was not musical. He loved music, and he had a great record collection. Basically, every Saturday, he'd buy an LP. and we had classical music, we had Pink Floyd, we had Kiss, we had Electric Light Orchestra, we had a bit of everything. He was really into Elvis and the Beatles, and I got a big brother who tried playing guitar for about 3 weeks and then just stopped. And then a few years later, I started hanging out with these guys, and one of them had an electric guitar, another one had a drum kit. Now I must have been like 11 or 12, and suddenly it was like it was possible. I didn't even know that where I was from that they had electric guitars. I thought they only had electric guitars in the big cities. So finally I could see like real electric guitars and the drum kit. And since we had a piano back home, I started playing piano. And then a year later, I picked up the guitar, and it didn't take long for me to realize that, that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I got my first band after about a year and a half of playing. And when I was 16, I was playing bars already. And by the time I was 18, I turned pro, doing over 100 shows a year. And that was back in 93. So, and I haven't stopped. I never had a job.
Wow. So where in Canada, what are your roots from? And you're in Quebec, is
Yeah,
it?
Trois-Rivières, Quebec, which is halfway between Montreal and Quebec City. And I moved to Montreal when I was 18, lived in Montreal for 25 years. And eventually, I'm a studio owner, and I wanted to buy a house, and I just couldn't afford buying a house in Montreal. And I needed like a big place to have my studio. So I moved back to my hometown, and we're in my studio right now, which is in the garage, all the outboard stuff, and I got a bunch of amps, and this is where I hang out.
Do you root for the Habs or do you root for the Nordiques?
When I was a kid, it was like basically 50-50. So you'd get into fights, in the streets because, half the kids were into the Nordiques and half were into the Habs. I was mostly into the Habs.
What about Canadian rock, Canadian metal? I mean, we all love Rush and Triumph, but there's other bands out there. I mean, Saga, Voivod.
Voivod are really good friends of mine. Actually, the first Rocky, the bass player that they've had for the past 10 years, is the first bass player I ever played with. He's from the same hometown as me. Dan Mulgay, the guitar player, also from the same hometown. So I met Rocky when I was just starting out to play, and we had a friend in common. And then the year after that, we both changed school, and we ended up in the same school in the same class, and they put us in the jazz combo. And I had been playing for about a year, Rocky too. And then he played in my band. He played on a bunch of my records. And when I started this one man band thing, I didn't have a lot of gigs anymore with the band, and he ended up joining Voivod, which was back when we were teenagers. Rocky had his two favorite bands were Metallica and Voivod, and we went to see Voivod, the Nothing Face tour when we were 15, and like I don't know how many years later he joined Voivod, and Dan Mulgrew was I've known him for like 25 years, 30 years, and you mentioned Rush. When I started playing, that was like the band, like because they were Canadians, and they could really play, and they were great. And I'm still a huge fan, huge Rush fan. A band that's like they were literally legends here in Canada, and they were like the biggest Canadian band. They didn't make it as big in the States. Was the Tragically Hip. The Tragically Hip, great, great band. There's an awesome documentary that came out on them. I don't know if it's yeah, I think it's on is it on Prime or something like that? I guess it's available in the States too. But they were a great band. I opened for them once, and I was blown away by their show. Um, back when I remember Helix, when MTV started, and I ended up opening for Helix years later at Healy's Club, Jeff Healy's Club, and
Oh, yeah.
and I opened for Helix at Jeff Healey's club in Toronto the night that Jeff Healey died. So we did the gig, didn't sleep, got back to Montreal, and I opened the TV. I got home at around 10 a.m. I opened the TV, and it's all over the news. Jeff Healey just died, and I was playing his club the night before. Jeff Healey was a huge influence. When I started playing, he didn't have an album yet, but he had a video on Much Music, the Canadian equivalent to MTV, and it was See the Light. Before the first album was called See the Light. And before it was about a year before the album came out. He just had the video, and I recorded it on VHS, and I'd watch it all the time. And then the album came out. I was blown away by it. And the first real show that I saw that I bought a ticket for was Jeff Healey See the Light in Montreal. That tour, and huge influence. That guy could really play. He was unique. And around the same time, Roadhouse came out, so I'd watch Roadhouse just to see Jeff Healey play. I got to meet him a few times. I opened for him, and we played on an album by Nanette Workman, who's a singer from Mississippi. She actually she sang back vocals on Honky Tonk Woman, and You Can't Always Get What You Want by the Rolling Stones, but she ended up moving to Montreal like in the late 60s or something like that, and I played with her. I produced an album for her. That's how I got to meet Jeff Healey the first or second time, and most of my influences are 60s rock stuff, the blues rock, and the original blues guys. I got to meet a lot of these guys because they come to Montreal, and I would be opening for these guys, or I would be my band would be the backup band. So I got to meet Albert Collins. I got to play with Hubert Sumlin, who was Howlin' Wolf's guitar player. I did a whole show with Hubert Sumlin. Uh, I played with the Fabulous Thunderbirds. I opened for Jimmy Vaughn 4 times, Buddy Guy 4 or 5 times. I got to meet a lot of these guys, a lot of my heroes.
Were you in your one-man band extravaganza at that point?
I started the one-man band about, I guess it must have been in like 2011. And after like almost 20 years in the business, what happened is at that time, I started as like this young hotshot guitar player. But then, what happens is like you hit your 30s and you're not the hotshot kid anymore, and I had signed to a label and in Canada, what happens is that a lot of record labels, they don't do anything unless they got grant money. And they did not get the grant money that they were supposed to get. So they didn't put any promotion in the album. That album was called Whiplash Love back in 2011. It was a great record. It had a lot of really good songs on it, but nothing happened with it because they didn't promote it. So since the album didn't get promoted, I didn't get a lot of shows. So I figured, I could do solo shows. At the same time, I had just become a partner in a studio in Montreal. And I had this huge mortgage every month, so I was really in debt. And I thought that the studio had clients, but they didn't have any clients. So, and I was living right on top of the studio. So I had the studio to myself, and I couldn't afford a band, So I I gave this list of smaller clubs that I used to play at to my agent, and I told him, you know, book solo gigs, book me some solo gigs in these places. And at night, during the week, I'd go down to the studio and I'd record by myself. And I've been, like I know how a studio works. I've been having like home studios since like 1999. So I'd go there and I put up the mics, and but at first it was just like guitar, vocals, and like foot stomp. Eventually I got a bass drum. Eventually I got a hi-hat, and I recorded a bunch of tracks, put them together, and that was an album called Solo Recordings Volume 1, which outsold everything that I had released before that, and basically since and it got a Juno nomination. It won Album of the Year at the International Blues Challenge in Memphis. Sold like 20,000 copies and put me back on the map, you know. And I did a bunch of shows with that album, like 175 shows. And so then people were like, you know, you got to do Solo Recordings Volume 2. So I did Volume 2, and it did even better. It won the Juno Award for Blues Album of the Year. Won like 7 Maple Blues Awards, which are the Canadian Blues Awards, and it opened up a lot of doors for me. And then I released Volume 3, and so it started, like I said, it was just like a bass drum, and then I just kept adding stuff. You know, when it came time for Volume 2, I was trying to find a way to get a bass going on at the same time. So I figured, you know, if I had these old acoustic guitar pickups from the 60s that you'd put in the sound hole, and it had a cable. So I figured if I just put that under like the 2 bigger strings, put that to an octaver pedal and a bass amp, I could probably have a bass sound. And I tried it, and it worked. At first it was just like it, you know, held together with duct tape, and then, you know, I was like, you know, it'd be nice to be able to hit a cymbal now and
For
then, you know, had to do punches. I figured, you know, how about like having a drumstick on the guitar's headstock? So, and then I had to learn how to use that stuff, you know, and then so I got the cymbal, I got the hi-hat there, and then eventually I got the maraca on the drumstick, and I added a snare drum that I play with a bass drum pedal. So I'm standing up. I got one foot on playing the kick drum, the other foot doing the snare drum. I got the bass that I'm playing with my thumbs. Fortunately, I don't use a pick, and so I can do the bass lines with my thumbs, you know. And I'm playing the hi hat and the cymbal with the drumstick, and then, I've been doing this for 12 years, for 13 years, you know, so I'm doing stuff now that I never thought would be possible. I never I never played drums before, you know, so I had to learn all of that stuff, and picked up harmonica on the way also, you know. And so but on this new record, it's like I really pushed it way further than I thought I'd be able to do, you know. And the whole album is recorded. I recorded everything at the same time, you know. I'm not overdubbing. It's just like I'm playing the guitar, the bass, and the drums at the same time.
So,
Uh,
I mean, that's so Steve, a couple questions on this. I mean, it is fascinating when you watch the videos. I'm in awe because I'm not a musician, but listen, there are, I'm sure, plenty of other musicians that can, they're adept enough where they can play guitar, sing, and maybe kick a little drum. But you're using both feet to illustrate. You're using both feet, and you got the neck of the guitar. So for our listeners, Steve's got the neck of the guitar with this little bowl kind of attached, and the drumsticks. That's the maraca. Okay, and then he's tapping away, and you're singing. And I'm going, how does your brain function that you can like? You got to be really tuned in, like concentrated. Like you can't have an off day. You can't like stub your toe walking
no,
out, shoveling ice or
I
something
can't
like
get
that.
drunk anymore and do a show the next day. I used to do that when I was younger. I can't do that anymore.
Oh,
Not with that show, and not at 50, you know.
well, but
But the
when you're
way it
yeah,
works is like it's all there's the subconscious mind does a lot of it. And it's just like what I say, when people ask me, usually I tell them, you know, like you're able to have a conversation, breathe, and walk at the same time. And sometimes you're even thinking about something else, you know. And so it's the same thing, but you got to be really comfortable with all of these levels of things happening, you know. So I don't have it's not like I'm thinking about all of these things at the same time, you know? Uh, uh, it's just I've been doing it for so long that I'm before I started the one-man band thing, I was used to singing and playing at the same time. And like I mentioned before, I don't use a pick. And when I was 15, I started learning, you know, these Robert Johnson songs and Big Bill Brucey and Merle Haggard and all that kind of guitar playing where the bass does the thumb does the bass line and the other fingers they do the guitar line basically. So I had that down already. That took years to get there. It took me 20, 25 years, 30 years to be able to do that. And then I added one foot. And as a musician, you're used to foot stomping and to keep the time. So that was easy. The biggest challenge was to add the other foot. That was hard at first. And it was like really basic, like the bass drum on the first and third beat and the hi-hat on the second and fourth beat. Boom-ch, boom-ch, boom-ch. And then I did that for a while and then replaced the hi-hat with a snare drum. So it sounded more like a rocking thing. And then adding the hi-hat and the cymbal. And it just kept on evolving to where now I do like real there's like it sounds like a real drummer what I'm playing with the drums, and it sounds like a real bass line, and it sounds like three people, but like it's not that complicated once you take the bass line. If you just take the bass line, it's pretty simple. The guitar is a bit more complicated. The drums, it's like a retard playing drums, but but it works.
But if you're right-handed, it's not easy to use the left foot. It's like when you drive, nobody wants to use the left foot on a pedal.
That's another thing. I'm left-handed, but I learned how to play right-handed. I play right-handed guitar, but I'm left-handed. So I've developed all of these things up since I was a kid, basically. Being left-handed, I had to learn how to do a lot of things right-handed. And when I started playing, I wanted to play guitar left-handed, but my friend told me that a left-handed guitar would cost me $200 more than a regular
Yes.
guitar. And my budget was $200 for a guitar. So I had to learn right-handed. But it's all of these things that led to that, and it probably helped me to be able to do what I'm doing now. It's just accidents and figuring out a way to do it just to keep. It's also I do all of that stuff so I can keep playing the guitar. Basically, that's my love. That's what I love to do, playing the guitar. And I thought I'd do the one man band thing for about a year or two, just pay off the credit card and pay off the bills and all of that. But I sort of found my style and my sound with it. The limitations of it, it they sort of help.
Listen, your costs are less. You don't have to pay a band, right?
Yeah.
Your venue costs you need less room on stage. You can put all your equipment in one cargo van or your car or whatever, right? So that, in a sense, your overhead is a lot less. You can get out there and do a show, and your setup and breakdown time is probably 3 times quicker.
It made sense when I started doing it because CDs were starting. Sales were going down, and streaming was starting to become the thing. Now it's all streaming, and I sell CDs and LPs, but I mean it doesn't even cover the cost of recording an album, and streaming doesn't either. I mean, you don't make any money with the streaming. So having a band and touring can be like really hard. So it enabled me to tour Europe. Like in 2017, I started doing like big tours in Europe, mostly Germany and the UK and all that. I lost money, but imagine if I would have had a band, I wouldn't. It would have been like impossible. And I don't know. I've done the album that came out before this one called Dear Illusion came out 2 years ago, and I had a horn section on it, and I toured with a band, and it was fun, but people don't pay more for me as a band than me as a one man band. And it's just it's really hard. It's hard to make music, to make a living these days, touring with a band. It makes more sense doing the one man band, and people seem to be more impressed by that than what I do with a band.
And I'm sure going to see it live, it's got to be cool. Like, I mean, I don't know if you ever come down to the States, but if you were down in the tri-state New York, New Jersey area, I would love to come see this because it's a conversation piece. And you're like, probably people are like, holy crap, look at this guy up here. He's doing everything. Then they want to ask you a million questions after the show and they're buying merchandise, right?
It's different. I mean, there's a lot of trios with good guitar players doing guitar solos. There's a lot of that, you know. And when I play with a band, that's basically what I do, you know. When I play as the one man band, it's completely different, and people haven't seen that before, at least not the way that I do it, you know.
We're talking with Steve Hill, the do-it-yourself extraordinaire. So we're going to take a short break right now, and when we come back, we're going to hear about the Hanging on a String album and all of those amazing instruments that he plays, all by himself.
Metal Mayhem ROC. Let's get into the new album, right? You got 8 tracks on the album. When you recorded these 8 songs, did you do it in your sort of live one-man extravaganza style, or was it you got behind the drum kit, did a drum
did
track and a
everything
bass
at
track?
the same time. I overdubbed the vocals after the first day in the studio. The producer was like, because I sing really loud. I've always had me playing guitar when I sang, so I play really loud. So I learned how to. I I sing loud because I've always been a loud guitar player, and my vocal was getting into the drums mics, you know, the drum microphones, and it was it was fucking up his drum sound, you know. So he was like, we'll overdub the vocals, but I was ready to do the vocals live. That's what I was supposed to do, and I did the whole album in 5 days. I had 6 days, and we did it in five. It's all first, second, or third takes, but it took like 6 months of like really hard work to get there. But it's all recorded. It's all recorded live, except like I mentioned, some of the vocals.
You know, the title track, Hanging on a String, it was, let's say, your newest single in video. I love it because it's catchy and it's got this groovy kind of radio friendly sound. But there's so much behind the story. And that's what I found interesting about all your songs is there's this underlying message or like a couple clues where you got to figure it out and you go, ah, that's what that's about here. It doesn't catch you initially, but I mean, Steve, there was you woke up with a fire in your friend's house. There's a car accident, your second one in a year or so, where another car red a red light. There's plane crash. There's all these cool sort of graphics, but I mean, not to minimize these experiences, but what the hell happened in all these things?
I'd had the plane crash that happened like 25 years ago, and in the song, it says that it happened in Germany because it rhymed, but it happened in Belgium. And we did a 360 on the runway. But that was like in
Oh boy.
1990, 98 or something like that. That's a long time ago. And there's the car accident thing. That car accident that I'm talking about in the song, that happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I released an album, and a week later, I fell asleep coming home from a gig. But, I'd been driving for 2 hours, and I was 5 minutes away from my place, and I fell asleep, and, the car was a total wreck. I was fine, and for, like, 24 hours, I was like, "Man, I'm the luckiest fucking guy on earth." The next day, my father died out of the blue,
Oh,
didn't expect it at all. I was a bar owner at the time. I sold my shares last year, but a guy got beat up in the bar and disappeared, and they found him in the river 6 months later. And that he disappeared, and it was all over the news, all over, you know, like true crime shows were talking about it. And so that all happened in a week. The car accident, my father died, the guy disappeared, and it was a bit too much. I pulled the plug on everything. I stopped promoting the record. I was like, I need some time off, you know, like it was too much.
yeah, I don't blame you.
And then I started touring again, 2023, and I'm on the West Coast. I'm doing a tour of the West Coast. That must have been like April last year. And there's somebody filmed a portion of the show in Calgary, and I posted it back on Facebook. And my friend Brian from Loughton Audio, he's got a microphone company in California, and he happens to be at 606 with Daryl Thorpe, who's the engineer, mixer, and producer of my album. And they're at 606, and Brian picks up his phone and he sees me, and he's been, we'll get back to that later, but he calls me and he's like, man, you should really come down and record in LA. You should record at 606. And he's been telling me that for 6 or 7 years. And I'm always like, oh, yeah, that'd be awesome, man. And let's talk soon. And then a week later, I, I finished the tour and I'm sleeping in the basement at my tour manager's place. And it smells, I'm like halfway between sleep and reality. And I'm dreaming of barbecue and it smells like barbecue. And I'm like, but I open my eyes and there's smoke everywhere and the house is on fire.
Wow.
And I get my friend out of there and another friend comes and picks me up and drives me to the airport. And I'm sitting in my seat in the plane. Uh, just like every time I finish a tour, I take a photo. I, I write a little something, I post it, and then I take a nap, So I
Yeah.
woke up in a house on fire. I just did 10 shows in 11 days. I'm tired, whatever. And took a nap, woke up in Montreal, um, turned on my phone, and I got a message from Brian from Loughton Audio. And he's like, man, are you okay? Give me a call. I talked to him and he's like, hey, man, that's a great line for a song. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Great line for a song. And he ended up booking the studio, booking Daryl, 10-time Grammy winner Daryl Thorpe, who does the Foo Fighters records, who's done Radiohead, Beck, Paul McCartney, fucking Jay-Z, you name it. And he booked the whole thing and paid for it. And yeah, and that's a friend, and that's somebody who really believes in me. And I've known him for about 7 or 8 years. They hired me to do the NAMM show and a few things in the States like that to demo the microphones. And I was working with Daryl for those things. So I had 3 months to write an album and to practice it, to learn how to play it, to record it live in the studio. So I go to the studio. That was like August 2023. My friend Johnny Pilgrim, who lives in LA, and he's from Canada, and we write songs together. He wrote most of the lyrics. I write the lyrics with him, and he comes to pick me up at the airport. Picks me up, me and my girlfriend, and 15 minutes later, somebody ran on a red light straight into us. I get broken ribs. And I got one day before I get into the studio, and I got into the studio. I can't sing at the same time. The second day is even harder. And on the third day, the producers, both Brian and Daryl, decided to postpone the whole thing. And I'm so pissed off because for me, that's my big break. And because of another car accident, another stupid thing, all my dreams are out the window. And I'm like, I screwed up and I'm like, they're not gonna call me again, this is over. But they booked Brian booked the studio again for January. So that gave me an extra 3 months to heal my wounds. I had to cancel a tour in Europe and Scandinavia. And but it gave me more time to be ready for the recording. And I think it's a better album having had the accident than if I didn't had the second car accident. And that song, Hanging on a String, wouldn't have happened without all of these things. Uh, Brian wouldn't have booked the studio without the house on fire and that post that I did. And it all happened, like there's always like a positive side that comes with something negative. And I don't think this album would have happened without these accidents. So
Yeah, no, it's. Listen, I'm glad you're still here for this
yeah, me too.
because we wouldn't be talking if it wasn't for that. And
You know what? It makes for good stories, and you have a dachshund, but you're more like a cat with 9 lives, or hopefully, I'm gonna cross my fingers and toes, Steve, right now, so that nothing else happens. All right, because I want to make sure you're on the next time in 2 years to the next album. But that's a good song, and there's other great stuff on here too. Your other singles, World Gone Insane. I mean, you could tie in World Gone Insane maybe with you know who, because I think there's everything that's gone on in the world, from politics to the pandemic.
Yeah, well, who's about AI, and the whole album is like, it's very personal, but at the same time, it's universal. Yeah, on one level, it's the story of a musician facing, like adversity, but also the state of the music business right now, and where it's harder to tour, and you got AI in the picture now. Like I was watching Rick Beato's podcast the other day, and he found out that there's like playlists on Spotify that some of those artists are not real artists. It's AI made by Spotify, so that they don't have to pay the artists, which is crazy. And they're coming up with new Beatles songs, and like, it's a completely different world right now than the world that I was living in when I started in this business. It's a completely different business. There's hardly a business now, but there's also that all of these changes, and it's happening like really, really fast. Politically, it's like it's very divided. It's like that in the States, but it's also like that in Canada. And social media is like, it really, like about a year and a half ago, I got on TikTok for the first time, and it blew my mind how you can really get like completely different version uh, from one day to another, or from like my TikTok to your TikTok. And like last summer, I was like on TikTok, and uh, I was getting stuff that was happening in the UK, and it was like, from what I was seeing on TikTok, they were close to having a civil war. But I check out the paper, and it's like all I see is peaceful protests. So what am I to believe in that? It's very hard to know the truth. It's very hard to know if you're watching that. I'm not gonna say what channel, but you watch one channel, and one side of like, you get one side of the story, then you get another side of the story, and sometimes it's completely opposite, and I don't know what to believe in anymore. I don't know like, as far as what's going on in the States, if you watch Canadian news, it's not the same version as if you watch Fox, and it's not the same version as if you watch ABC. And and
Yep.
and it's the same thing in Canada. So it's very hard to know what's going on now. And in a song in the song "World Gone Insane," the hero of the story is just so tired of all of that. He disconnects. He gets rid of the phone, gets rid of the TV. Basically, he goes to live in a cabin out in the woods because he's had it with all of that. And it's a feeling that I have sometimes.
It made me think back in time to when Black Sabbath put out the Dehumanizer album in 1992, and the late great Ronnie James Dio. Maybe he had a crystal ball at that time, but thinking about the title Dehumanizer, the dehumanizing of the human condition, and that lead track, Computer God. I mean, look at what that was. That album came out in 1992, and that's what we're looking at today. I wish Ronnie was around to see it, but he had something there where he saw that trend coming.
Or Metal Gods on British Steel in 1980.
Yes.
Judas Priest. I
Yep.
mean, it's like we're living in this world of science fiction, that we thought it might happen someday, but it was like a nightmare vision in metal songs. But
Yeah.
now It's like we're living it, man. This is the future, and it's not flying
Where
cars.
was
It's not flying cars. It's something else.
where was that the World Gone Insane video? I said, "Oh, maybe that's the old Lace
Man,
studio. Maybe that's like the
that's
old."
half an hour away from my place. That's an old paper mill
Okay.
that closed
Okay.
down, and it feels very post-apocalyptic.
I was waiting for Rick from The Walking Dead to come out because it felt like a Walking Dead episode. But hey, listen, on a more positive note, Show Ya. I love this one because it's catchy and upbeat, and I love how the line, I heard my first Van Halen record when I was 6. So going back up to the top of the hour, we were talking when you said you picked up guitar, but you got the bug at a young age and Van Halen, you heard it, you were a kid. Maybe a grade school kid said, "Who the hell is this guy, Steve, listening to this bullcrap rock and roll?" And right, but
That one is really my story.
yeah.
I got into music at an early age, and I was doing lip syncing shows at school, at talent shows, and using a tennis racket or a hockey stick. And then when I was 13, I started playing guitar for real. At 16, I was playing bars. And then, like in the song, I met the record man and I got screwed. What the song doesn't say is that I got screwed many times. And then the song ends and the guy is touring in a beat up car. I'm touring in a beat up Dodge Grand Caravan. But just like in the guy says, don't get me wrong, I'm still having fun up here putting on a show for you. And I'm still having a lot of fun playing, and that's what drives me, and that has never changed. So it's really not a glamorous life. It's not what people expect. Being on tour is, they're long hours, man. And it's a lot of hard work, but I love playing, and I love playing for the people. I love to see the a smile on a person that I'm playing music to, or somebody singing one of my songs at a show, or just people dancing. Like that's what drives me. My love for music and making people happy.
No, that's a true testament to your love of the craft, and we love guys like you for that. Um, Another song that you could tie in there is I love the song Maggie because initially I'm like, that must be his wife or girlfriend, and I'm like, nope, that one's about his
Yep,
guitar.
Maggie, my guitar. That's Johnny Pilgrim. That's my co-songwriter. Johnny, he wrote that one. He wrote pretty much all the lyrics for this one, and it was his idea. And at first I was like, really, a song about a guitar? And I tried it. I came up with the music, and people seem to really, really like that one.
It's just ties it all together with the cleverness of the lyrics. The other single that you have there is The Devil's Handyman. I mean, I like this one because it's slow and bluesy, really showcases your slide guitar work and other things there, and there's different styles on the album. Going back to like World Gone Insane, that almost sounds like a stoner rock kind of, stoner rock like metal song, but Devil's Handyman is more of that traditional blues rock there. And it's your song. It's a song about like the rock and roll tale of addiction, right? The devil's knocking at your door, and it hits so many people, right? So maybe talk a little bit about that one.
Well, I've had my issues with addiction myself, like a lot of musicians,
Okay.
and this one is like, it's like another take on it. It's the dealer's perspective. It's the dealer singing the song, like, and he acts like he's your friend at first, and he's there to comfort you, and he's always going to be there. He's always going to be your friend. Uh, and he's talking to a teenager, and then to a washed up starlet, and then to an old junkie. But I think a lot of people can relate to that. We a lot of, especially in this business, a lot of people have to deal with
Mhm.
addiction issues.
Steve, the album is great. I mean, before we wrap this one up, I have to ask you about your choice for the Doors classic, right? You that fits in the end when the music's over. It's a cool version. It's psychedelic, a little bit psychedelic. Yeah, it's got this kind of fresh bluesy take on it. And I love this one because maybe it's just the way the album ends, but lots of cool guitar effects. And then you kind of really go off and jam at the end. So what made you want to take this track on? Because I'm sure playing live shows, I see you have your own Jimi Hendrix kind of concert thing too, but there's got to be a lot of artists that you can draw from and play in your live show. Why this one?
Yeah, that was Brian. That was Brian's idea. Brian Loudenschlager, one of the producers of the album, and I guess he heard a song on Solo Recordings Volume One that made him think. My vocal on that song reminded him of Jim Morrison. I don't know why. He told me, you should try to cover When the Music's Over. And with my first band, we used to play a lot of Doors songs because my singer could really sing a bit like he sang a bit like Jim Morrison, and it was around the time of the Doors movie, like in 1990 or something like that. So I was a huge Doors fan when I was a teenager. Um, and then I figured out a tuning to play it, and checked out the lyrics, listened to the song once, and um, came to I pressed record in my studio, and I recorded 2 takes. I sent the second one to Brian, and he was blown away by it. He was like, "Man, this is on the album." And in the studio, I did 2 takes, and we had a filming crew there because they're doing a documentary. And one of the camera guys was like, "Man, I'm sure you played that song a lot live." I'm like, "No, man, I've only played it 4 times in my life." But it was like really, really natural, and it came about like really easily. Just like and it felt like it was meant to be on the album. And having that song to finish the record, it sort of, to me, um, the album, with that song in there, it feels like a concept album. It feels like, it was a brilliant idea from Brian to have it there. And the guitar effects at the end that you mentioned, I have nothing to do with that. That's all Daryl Thorpe, and that's he's doing tape stuff because we recorded the album on
Nice.
tape, and it's all like speeding, slowing down the tape, and all of that. Uh, he does the same thing at the end of World Gone Insane. There's about a minute and a half of noises, and all I did was like one note, and it's just him playing with the tape and with the phasing, flanging, and slowing down the tape. And he did like amazing tape effects on these 2 tracks, World Gone Insane and When the Music's Over. And they're 2 of my favorite tracks on the album. They're pretty long. The album only has 8 songs, but When the Music's Over is 8 minutes long, and World Gone Insane is almost 7 minutes long. And like out of these 7 minutes, there's a minute and a half of noises at the end, but it's like it brings the song to a new level. It really, really fits the song, and that's the brilliance of Daryl, and that's what happens when you work with really talented people like that. Uh, I'm a one-man band, but this album is really a team effort between me, Brian Loudenschlager, and Daryl Thorpe, and Roman, Oliver Roman, the engineer on the album, who did a killer job too. And there's that classic Neve board that we use that's at 606. That's the board that you hear on all of these classic records. It's the board that they recorded Nevermind on, Appetite for Destruction, the first Fleetwood Mac, so many killer albums, and the album just sounds really, really good. And there's the material is recorded to tape. Not a lot of people record to tape anymore, but it's also like the talented people that I work with.
It's there's a lot to like about this, Steve. Everything you're describing, man. Your resiliency, your stories, you're dodging bullets and accidents, you're sober, and you recorded on tape and you got kick-ass album. So, what's like touring look like? How many shows a year do you do? And what's this Jimi Hendrix show you also do?
I do on usually I do like about 100 shows a year. The Hendrix
Oh wow.
the Hendrix thing is during the pandemic. There's this place in Quebec City that asked me to do a Hendrix concert, an online concert, and I was like, yeah, why not? Like the reason why I started playing guitar was mostly because I was into Hendrix, and as a teenager, Hendrix was my hero, and to me, he's still the greatest. Um, we did that thing online, and the reaction was great. So then the place, which is called the Palais Montcalm, and it's this huge theater. It's 1,000 seater, and it's been there for forever. It's like a legendary place in Quebec City, and they asked me to do it for an audience, and the place was sold out. And I don't think I've ever had as many standing ovations as I've had that night. It was like between every song, people would stand up and people were going crazy. And so uh, it the word got around, and my agent was like, "Man, you got to do a tour out of that." And I'm like, "No, no, no, it's just a one-off thing, and I'm doing my songs. I don't do cover shows, you know." And but it was so much fun doing it, and I got this great band to do it with: Sam Harrison on drums and Alec McElkman on bass, and so we decided to do a tour. It's just 14 shows in Quebec, um, and that's it, like for now. It's not something that I would do all the time, But it was so much fun to do, and it's so much fun to play. I mean, it's like it's everything that I wanted to do when I was a teenager, and I get to do it 35 years later. But it's like I said, it's just 14 shows. I always do Voodoo Child. Usually, when I finish my shows, I do it as a one man band. And but on this show, we do a lot of stuff. I like to do long concerts, and so we get to play a lot of stuff from Hendrix, who was people know him as a great showman, great guitar player, but he was also a great songwriter and so creative in the studio. Broke a lot of boundaries in the studio, invented a lot of recording techniques, and I'm still in awe of everything that he did in that really, really short career, because he died at 27, but he started recording the stuff that we hear. He was like 20, 24. So within 3 years, man, he did like so much stuff. It's just mind
Yeah.
boggling. So it's great
Yeah,
to be able to
completely.
pay tribute to his music, and I do it with a lot of respect. But then again, like I don't do solos note for note. I do my thing, and I play with my fingers. I don't play with a pick if I'm playing Hendrix. It's my style of guitar playing, but it's really a tribute to the genius of Jimi Hendrix.
So that's awesome. I wish you luck with that too. So the new album, Hanging on a String, is out now on No Label Records. So Steve, what are your socials? Where can the fans learn all about Steve Hill and your music?
Well, you can there's Facebook page, there's Instagram, there's TikTok. I'm not on X, but I also have a website, stevehillmusic.com. So you can find everything on stevehillmusic.com. I'm on YouTube. You can find a bunch of videos on YouTube, but you can also find I got this podcast called Gear Talk. If you're into guitar stuff, I talk about guitar pedals, amps, guitars, and a bunch of things like that. And I'm very active. If you write to me on Facebook, I will answer. It's not somebody else, and it's not a robot. It's me.
Well, that's cool. Well, Steve, this has been a pleasure. You're a cool guy, man. I feel like I got to know you in an hour, and
It was very nice talking to you, my friend.
From fellow Dachshund owner to music lovers, I love your story, and I hope to maybe someday get a chance to see you and meet you. So just a reminder, head over to metalmayhemroc.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's the best way to stay updated on podcast episodes like this. Check out our YouTube channel because we have lots of videos there and concert reviews. And make sure you check out our radio show on Monday nights on MetalDevastationRadio.com. And if you like what we're doing, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. So for my guest today, Steve Hill, I'm Metal Walt, and this is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.